All right, I'm looking and seeing it's right at 1:15 here, so we will go ahead and get started. We want to welcome everybody again to our webinar today. This has become a fun part of our week to communicate and interact with our members and the presentations that we're working with here. So we welcome you and look forward to getting your feedback throughout these webinars that we're working with. So you will receive a survey at the end of it, and we look forward to that, and we value your opinions and your communication. So make sure that you communicate back to us and let us know how we're doing and what we can do to help you through this. So for those of you that are not familiar with AWCI, let me give you a little bit of an introduction of who we are and what we do. We are an acronym, AWCI, and that stands for the American Watchmakers Clockmakers Institute. And our mission statement is setting service standards and educating the horological community. And we work with both the watchmakers and clockmakers here in the United States and actually in other areas. We've got lots of folks that have been joining us now from outside the United States, and we welcome you guys. We recognize it's an extra special treat for you guys to stay up late and get up early to be able to join us. A couple of the things that AWCI does, and we think we do them very, very well, is one, our monthly periodical magazine, which is called the Horological Times. In this, we have our membership submit and put in articles of topics for the horological community, and it's a great publication that you can either get monthly, both electronically and a physical copy, and you can actually even join to just receive the magazine if you would like. We really focus mainly on education and certification, and those two things we do both in face-to-face formats, and now we're doing them kind of in a digital form and in extension form, and we're very grateful for the technology to be able to do that with you today. A couple more benefits that we have is one, our membership directory. As a watchmaker or clockmaker, as you join AWCI, you can put your information out there, and as folks call in or look at our website, that allows them to see your business and allows them to contact you directly to be able to get services from your organization there. So it's a wonderful opportunity and really used a lot by consumers out in the field. We also have a mobile classroom. You can see it in the picture here. It's taken in front of our facility here. Great 38-foot RV that we've converted into a workshop, and we really look forward to getting back into our mobile classroom and bringing education back to the community. We have a number of different pieces of merchandise and books that we have available that you can either get from our library as a member, or you can purchase on your own, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's awci.com, and you can go to our store there and be able to purchase items that you would like, and we are shipping those things out on a daily basis through the COVID-19 pandemic that we're going through right now. I also want to thank our IAB members. Our industry partners are over on the right side. As you go through and see these are businesses that help us, and we definitely want to do our part to give them a shout out and to help them as well. So the objectives for today, we're going to talk about kind of a standard operating procedure for returning back into a shop that's been closed, maybe how to, some best practices of how to interact with customers, how to bring that back forward and do so in a manner that's going to be safe for you and for your customers as well. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to safely handle watches. The same could apply to clocks or even to the jewelry that you're going to be working with out in the field. And then a really big part of what we're wanting to do today is to give you an opportunity to ask questions and try to get the answers from us. If we don't have the right answer, we'll get back to you. But this material we covered a few weeks ago with a wonderful doctor, Sarah Jacobs, and you know, we want to give you an opportunity to revisit that as many of you are opening back up into this new world we find ourselves in. I would like to do kind of some introductions of those that are going to be joining you today. Mr. Jordan Ficklin is our Executive Director, and he's going to take lead on this webinar today. He is a CW21, and he is a very knowledgeable individual on many different aspects, and this area is something that he's looked into extensively as we've reopened here at headquarters. So we really want to give a shout out to him on that. I will be on the phone call as well, manning questions, and we also have Mr. Tom Shoemaker, who's our lead instructor and a certified master watchmaker for the 21st century. And hopefully between the three of us, we'll be able to come up with any answers that you might need today. So having said all that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Jordan and allow him to begin to cover the material with us today.
Thank you, Jason, for that. Let me just see if I can't get my screen up here the way I want it for everyone. Is that showing okay?
Looks good for me. Yes, sir.
All right, so as Jason mentioned, when we had Dr. Jacobs on a couple weeks ago to talk about this topic, she went into great depth about her experience from the medical industry as a doctor and her knowledge of viruses in many of the concerns. And so we're gonna kind of go quickly past some of that information today. If you missed that webinar, I would say absolutely go and rewatch it. It is available on our website at awci.com/webinars for that more in-depth knowledge of that. Today, we really want to focus on, now that some of us are opening back up, that we're interacting with customers and doing this stuff, we want to get your questions answered. So we want plenty of time for you to ask your questions. So don't hesitate to fire off questions in the questions pane, to raise your hand, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for really a discussion. We'd like to hear from you what you're doing. In addition, as we make recommendations from our end about what we believe people should be doing in order to protect themselves. That original webinar, if you're looking for it, is titled Maintaining Your Health While Handling Watches in the Era of COVID-19. So you're returning to your workshop, and it's probably been closed for a few weeks at least, maybe a month or more. And so we've kind of broken down the tasks that we should be thinking about into three phases here: cleaning, organizing, and upgrading. This is a wonderful opportunity that we have returning to the workshop to put some thought into our workflow and these different kinds of things in our workshop. So first, the concerns cleaning as you return to your workshop. Right, primary consideration is probably dust. That's a normal consideration for us as watchmakers and clockmakers. We try and eliminate dust as much as possible, but if your workshop's been closed for a while, you're gonna have extra dust everywhere. And so we're gonna recommend going in there for sure and wiping down all your surfaces, whether they're above your bench, below your bench, vacuum out the inside of your drawers. It's an opportunity to do that spring cleaning, a thorough cleaning of your workshop. Beyond dust, there are the concerns that come with COVID-19 and this SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus that's floating around. Now, if you've been out of your workshop for a week or more, whatever virus that may have been there before should have been inactivated, died already. And so you shouldn't have to worry so much about that. But as you move forward and you're bringing new customer timepieces into your workshop, that concern becomes reactivated. And you need to think about what came in with that watch and how do I clean up after it to make sure that I don't have the virus floating around inside my workshop getting me sick or possibly be transferred to other watches and getting customers sick as well. And the last consideration there is tool maintenance, right? There may have been maintenance you should have conducted while you've been closed, or maybe you were so busy before that it got overlooked that needs to be taken care of. And so some of those things include examining the condition of all your steel tools, lathe beds, drill presses, this kind of stuff. Make sure they've got a light, very light film of oil on them to prevent rust. If any rust has formed, maybe the air conditioner wasn't running as much and a little humidity built up in your workshop, you want to be sure and remove that, get those tools conditioned to prevent the further buildup of rust on them. Your oil cups, if you left them with oil in them, that oil may be a little sticky and gummy. So a little more thorough than normal cleaning of those oil cups for sure, so that you got nice, clean, fresh way to move forward. Your cleaning machine. If you left your workshop not knowing that it was going to be the last day in your workshop and it had solutions in it, as those evaporate, they get thick and gummy. And so you definitely want to go in get rid of that solution. Clean those jars, get new solution in there. Also think about the jar lids and the seals, wiping them off, anything that may have condensed on them, the dust that may have formed there. Check your filters and on that, whether you've got the Elma Solvex that has filters for the solution, or you've got an older machine that has filters for air. Great time to look at those filters and replace those filters so that you've got a good working environment there. If there was water in your water tester, empty that out, clean out your water tester, get some new distilled water in there. Your bench may have dried out, and so depending what kind of bench you've got, if you've got a hardwood bench, conditioning that wood with the right kind of oil or whatever it is that you use on that bench is a good idea, something to think out. Overall, it's just that deep cleaning, spring cleaning stuff. We don't want to overlook that as you get back into your workshop. Make sure that it's all clean and ready to go again. Since you're going to be cleaning every square inch, everything, it's a great time to think about reorganizing. And one thing to think about is your tool storage, and another thing is to think about the entire workflow of your shop, including the way that your paperwork flows through your shop with jobs as they're going forward. And so I would take all the tools out of my bench, vacuum out the drawer, and then think about where their placement goes. So the tools that you use most often should certainly be in the easiest to get at drawers. Typically that's going to be your top drawers and in the front portion of those drawers. And it's great if you have the opportunity to put some organization in your drawers. There's a picture there of a laser cut set of foam. That's just 3 layers of craft foam, which you can get at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or one of these places, or certainly order on the internet. Cut with a contrasting color out for those. We drew those on the computer, sent them to the laser cutter, cut through those, keeps everything nice and organized. Everything has a place, everything in its place, easily accessible to get at those things. If you don't have the luxury of having multiple benches, one for dirty work and one for clean work, you want to be sure that those tools that you use for dirty jobs are in the bottom drawers. That way the brass shavings, the dirt, the oil, the stuff that may be on them doesn't filter its way down onto your clean tools. So your files and your stones, those should be lower in your bench. Your tweezers, your screwdrivers, your oil cups, those should be in the top drawers of your bench. And again, it's just thinking about that workflow. The tools you reach for all the time, maybe you've got a tray of your everyday tools that you bring out and put in the drawer. And then the next most common tools that are in your drawers are just right there, easily accessible. And then upgrade. Is it a good time to upgrade your tools? I mean, you're revamping the shop, you're thinking about reorganizing. Is it time to get that LED lighting, a new timing machine, a new cleaning machine? Maybe it's that air or vacuum that you wanted on the bench, a new water tester. Maybe it's a computer screen or a tablet that's right there, easily accessible, so you can follow jobs or look up tech guides while you're working on the watch. Maybe it's time for that positive, negative airflow so that the dust from your cleaning room doesn't make its way into the rest of your workshop, or even the stuff from the showroom. If you've got a positive flow where you're working on watches, a negative in your cleaning room, that's going to keep the dust at a minimum. And as you're thinking about upgrading your tools, you should also think about upgrading your prices. Is it time to change your prices? Customers are probably very understanding right now. Some of them may be struggling for money, others may not be. But if you're going to get new tools, or you decide you need some new tools, you have to pay for those. A small price increase might help you with that. And as we're going to examine here, the workflow, handling watches, jewelry, clocks, with the new considerations of COVID-19 is going to take a little longer, is going to require extra cleaning, and you should get compensated for that extra time and effort that you're putting into those products. I didn't talk very much about workflow when I was looking at that previous slide, but you should be thinking about workflow as the work goes through your shop, you don't want it crisscrossing paths, right? So if it goes from one bench to the next bench, you want to think about how the things are organized. Where is your timing machine? Where is your water testing equipment? Where is your cleaning machine? So that you can be the most productive and the most efficient, right? It's not going to be the same for everybody. It's going to depend on your shop layout, but you don't want to be getting up and moving around too much. It's good to get up and move around, take breaks and that kind of stuff, but as you're trying to be productive, you want things to move in a logical order. All right, we're going to move on now to safely interacting with customers. And there's a picture there, which we used to have as our banner for customer service, but you'll see that the watchmaker there is 6 inches from the sales associate and 2 feet from the customer, right? That used to be the ideal. It just can't be anymore while we're worrying about this virus floating around. And so the picture on the right, this is a jewelry store here in Ohio that's made some changes to your showroom, and it may be a little difficult to see, but there are clear acrylic sheets hanging above the showcases. And then there's a little gap of about 1 foot or so where they can handle jewelry back and forth and return repairs and that kind of stuff. But at face level, there's a plastic guard between you and the customer, right? Now, depending on the regulations where you are, that may mean you don't have to wear a face mask, just depending on what your local regulations are. So just a quick reminder here of what the concerns are when we're interacting with customers, right? Is you want to protect yourself and you want to protect them, right? The virus is transmitted primarily in droplets of water. And these are typically, these larger droplets are greater than 1 micron in size. These are what are generated when you're coughing or sneezing or talking animated like I am right now. A little bit of those droplets may fly out of the mouth. Even when you're putting things in the ultrasonic bath, it may splash or little droplets may pop out of there. And so these are the kind of areas where the virus may be transmitted from one person to another. And typically those droplets fall to the ground within a 3 to 6 foot radius. So if you can maintain that, you're good. When you are with less than 6 feet away, that's when you want to be sure you've got the face mask covering your mouth and your nose, and even an eye shield if you have a risk of those droplets, because there has been some research showing that through the mucous membranes around the eye, the virus can enter the body. Another way that it's shown that this virus can be transmitted is through aerosols. So these are droplets smaller than 1 micron. And this is generated in the medical field by suction or sonic hair brushes or steam, much less common generated by conversation and sneezes and that kind of stuff. These aerosolized particles can linger in the air for up to 3 hours. And if you're going to be exposed to this kind of stuff, that's where you need that particulate mask, an N95 that you hear so much about in the news, and definitely an eye shield. But it's much less likely that you're going to encounter those in your customer interactions. And so you shouldn't have to worry about that so much. The mask precaution from the first section there should be adequate for you there. So just the basic principles we're thinking about as we are interacting with customers, and this comes from the Department of Health website, is 1, protect the health of employees, customers, and their families, and 2, to support community efforts to control the spread of the virus. So here are some things that you should do when interacting with customers. Number 1, follow local guidelines and regulations, right? Whatever orders or mandates your local governments have put forward, you should adhere to those. That probably includes things like maintaining that physical distancing, wearing a face mask when physical distancing cannot be maintained, or maybe your ordinance requires it. Here in Ohio, our governor has said if you're going to open a retail operation, all employees should wear a face mask, and you should strongly consider requiring your customers to wear a face mask. You should be conducting daily health assessments. This is like taking temperature and just asking yourself or asking your employees, have you had any shortness of breath? Have you been coughing, sneezing, any of this, fever, any of these kind of things? You should consider limiting the number of customers in your store so that you can maintain that physical distancing. And this may be accomplished by having people schedule appointments. That way you know you won't have too many people in the store at any given time. Depending on whether you've got a buzzer system where you can limit that, you may have to put a staff member at the door to control and ask people to wait outside when you have too many people in the store already to be able to maintain those distances. Of course, wash your hands regularly, frequently, perhaps more than often. Certainly after every customer, you want to at least apply hand sanitizer or go in and do a thorough washing of your hands. And you want to clean and sanitize throughout the day, depending on how much volume of customer traffic you have in your store. You definitely want to be wiping down the surfaces, especially the frequently contacted surfaces. So the showcases where people may be touching their hands, the door handles, those should be regularly washed down with some kind of antiviral spray, bleach, alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, these kinds of things. And stay home if you're sick, or if your staff are sick, send them home and follow whatever recommendations you've heard from the CDC or from your local government about how to report that so that they can be tracking the disease so it doesn't spread. Some excellent resources for you on these are available from OSHA. If you go to osha.gov/COVID-19, they've got some great documents there for different industries. And I think for us, primarily, we're looking at the retail industry. Even if you don't interact every day with customers, 2 of those documents are in the handout section on here that you can download. The guidance on preparing workplaces and the guidance for retail workers are both available in the handouts. A few things we don't want you to do as it comes to interacting with customers. Don't forget to protect yourself, your property, and your customers. You want to maintain your normal security protocols. How will you deal with customers wearing masks? Normally, if you're in a retail jewelry store, you probably would have your security guard pull out his gun if somebody walked in your store with a mask. Well, times are different. And so you need to think about how are you going to handle that. If you're in a place where your local government has asked people to wear masks, what are you going to do? One possibility that I've heard stores considering is having their security camera in a vestibule or in their lobby with a sign that asks people to remove their masks so that they're on camera, and then put it back on when they come in the store so that you've got them on camera and you know who they are when they're in the store. If you're going to try and return customer jewelry or make sales curbside, you need to think about those security protocols as well. Many stores would have a security officer in their store. Well, if you're going to return valuable merchandise outside, do you need security outside? The answer is quite possibly yes, depending on the values in the neighborhood and these different concerns. The criminals aren't taking a break just because we're all facing this COVID-19 pandemic right now. So follow whatever established procedures you have for take-in as well. And so if you're going to let customers drop off jewelry, you still have to, or watches, you have to make sure it's well documented. You can't just have them drop it off and leave. Even though we've got all this and it may be a little more awkward, you need to look over the timepiece. You need to record any damage, a good indication of what it is. And a good reference for that is we did a webinar a while ago about take-in procedures, which is available on our webpage and on our YouTube, where you can watch that to figure out what those procedures should be normally. And certainly you should be continuing with that. Now I'm going to pause for a second here because I'm getting some information from people that my audio may have a funny clicking noise. I'm going to try and switch over to a different microphone, if you'll bear with me for just 1 second, and see if that makes a difference. So another thing you shouldn't do is touch the T-zone. That's your eyes, nose, mouth. These are the mucous membranes that where the virus can certainly enter your body. So you don't want to touch those with your hands ever, but especially not now. And you don't want to do anything to compromise your health or safety simply to make the sale. You definitely want to, there are things you just won't do right now that you may have done just to maintain that health. And that should be the most important thing. Health and safety should definitely be number one. So the last section here is the safely handling of watches, clocks, jewelry, right? And a couple of pictures there of some different things we're going to discuss in detail here. So the reason we're discussing this is, again, so that you can protect yourself. So when you are handling or have handled a customer's timepiece, you want to be sure and wash your hands. Hot water and soap, followed by an alcohol-based gel, hand sanitizer, Purell, this kind of thing. Washing for at least 20 seconds, which is how long it takes to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or Happy Birthday 2 times, is the recommendation. Certainly don't touch your face. If you're going to use gloves, they only work if you don't touch anything else. Using gloves is just like using finger cots. It means changing them after every operation, after every timepiece, so that you don't just transfer the contaminant from one item to the next. Clothes, you want to protect your clothes from carrying this virus, and so it's a good idea to wear a lab coat or an apron, especially if you're, say, putting things in the ultrasonic where there may be some splashing, using the steamer, this kind of stuff, and then change them and launder them when you get home. When it comes to your workspace and your surfaces, washing them with a detergent is adequate. Using a bleach rub or alcohol can produce a faster result. If you use bleach, it's recommended that they stay wet for 15 minutes. Alcohol, the same, or if you spray them with an alcohol-based solution, waiting until it has evaporated dry is adequate time to deactivate the virus. So the big question here is, how long does coronavirus live on surfaces, right? And so the research shows that it can live for 2 to 3 days, depending on what kind of surface we are talking about here. So here are some numbers from research done on the current form of the virus, which is SARS-CoV-2. That's the virus that causes COVID-19. And a previous version of this virus, SARS-CoV-1, which caused the SARS outbreak in 2003. And it seems that certainly perhaps up to 4 days, the virus can live on some surfaces. We haven't seen that scientifically for this version yet. The longest we've seen is 3 days, but since previous versions in the right environment could survive 4 days, if what you're going to do is plan on wait for the virus to die, you really need to wait 4 days. And so one possible SOP would be when the customer hands you something, you seal it up and you wait 4 days until you touch it. Maybe not the ideal situation, but certainly in 4 days' time, the virus will have died and you can work on the watch without any fear of contracting that virus yourself. A quick summary here. If you want to be a little more proactive than just waiting for it to die, the virus is inside of a capsule. That capsule is a combination of fats and proteins. And if you can break open that capsule, the virus will die much more quicker. So you can dry out that capsule. So 24 hours in a desiccator can deactivate the virus. Heating that capsule above 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes will deactivate the virus. You can dissolve that capsule, and you can use that with a detergent, the bleach, a solution of at least 70% alcohol, hydrogen peroxide vapor, or H2O2 gas plasma, which probably neither of you have in your workshops, any of you have in your workshops. Or you can degrade the capsule using UV light. So with direct sunlight, natural sunlight, it shows that about 72 hours to break down the capsule. And if you're using the UVC, which a lot of people are talking about, it can be much quicker in the proper dosage, and we're going to get into that here in a minute. So what you might consider doing, some of the recommendations. This is what we're all here for, right? And this is where the discussion really is going to begin with everyone. The first recommendation here is an ultrasonic cleaner. So Certainly for bracelets, I would recommend removing the bracelet from the watch, obviously protecting yourself while you're doing that operation because you haven't disinfected anything, placing it in an ultrasonic with a detergent in it, with the temperature above 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes is sure to deactivate that virus. The definite precaution there is, as you place it in the ultrasonic, you need to be cautious of those splashes. And so you'll see the gentleman there in the picture, he's got his face mask on, and he's got a face shield, and he's got protection for his clothing as well. And now this may be a new precaution for us, but those droplets hitting your face, if they contain virus that came off of the watch, can be dangerous. And so you want to consider that. Clockmakers probably already have a face shield like that they use when winding up mainsprings. Excellent. Watchmakers may have to consider getting one of those for use when interacting with the ultrasonic. Another point here is put the lid on the ultrasonic, right? That keeps the virus inside, right? If the liquid's not splashing out, it's there and it's going to deactivate with that 30 minutes exposure to the hot liquid there and to the detergent breaking everything down. So keep the lid on it as much as possible. That will also reduce any vapor entering the air. That being said, we checked with the medical community and they say that you don't get any of those micro droplets or aerosolization from an ultrasonic steamer unless it's at boiling temperature and generating steam. But still keep that lid on to avoid the splashes. UV is kind of the next big thing people are talking about. And if the basis here being is you need to take into consideration the strength of the UV light that you're producing and the area of the item which you want to disinfect in order to figure out how long. With a UV sterilizer like the one pictured here, that's a 6-watt sterilizer, the recommendation is 30 minutes for a watch to be exposed. And of course, anywhere the light doesn't get to can't be sterilized by the UV light. And so having a mirror in there so you expose both sides at once, it will help. If you've removed the bracelet and put it in the ultrasonic, you're going to expose most of the watch much easier to it. But you also want to consider, what is that UV lighting going to do to the watch? Is it going to fade the dial? And so you may want to experiment with some older dials with the paint and this kind of stuff with plastic crystals and see how they deteriorate under this UVC lighting. You may already have a UV lamp in your office, and based on the research we've done, they're going to be lower wattage, maybe just 1 to 2 watts, and so it's going to take even longer. Something like these is probably about a 60-minute time in order to sterilize an item. And so it takes time with the UV light. It certainly isn't instant. I've seen mention of these UV wands. Well, just wanding something isn't going to be enough exposure in order to kill the virus. You definitely need to expose it longer time than that. If you're curious about a specific device, Dr. Jacobs covered that in great depth in our previous webinar. I would watch that in order to see the calculations that you need to perform in order to determine how long of exposure you need for a certain item based on your specific UV apparatus that you've got there. Batteries and short repairs. Should you do a battery while the customer waits? Well, you got to ask yourself, how long is it going to take you to sterilize the item before you can work on it? If you're using the 30 minutes in the ultrasonic or 15-minute alcohol exposure, you got to wait at least that long. And so it may be that we don't do watch batteries while the customer waits in the short-term future until all this is passed over. You also need to then ask yourself, again, should you be charging extra? Are you dedicating more time to each workpiece? Are you investing in more materials? Are you changing out the solutions in your ultrasonic more often? All that's going to calculate into what it costs to perform a repair, and you may have to put a little extra charge. I got an email just yesterday from DHL. about their increase in charges due to handling items related to COVID-19. The businesses around you are adjusting their prices, and there's no reason you shouldn't be doing the same thing. I know that was a quick run through of these kind of things, but we definitely want to take your questions and address them. We want to hear what you're doing in your shops and answer those sorts of things as well. One thing I know was a question I had received from a member earlier, which I'm going to just tackle right off the bat here, is just using soap and water like we do with our hands on a watch, right? And I think that, sure, absolutely. You can do the same kind of thing. You have to penetrate all the surfaces, just like you have to get between your fingers when you're washing, right? And the backs and the fronts and the fingernails, all that kind of stuff. You've got to get between the links of the bracelet. You got to get around the back, all these kind of things. And you want to take great consideration to the fact that if you're using a small brush like a toothbrush or a scrubbing brush, how far do those water droplets travel as you're scrubbing that watch, right? If you've ever taken note when you're scrubbing with a toothbrush a watch, water droplets probably travel 10 feet or more when you flick off the stuff there. And so if you are going to scrub, it's the same precautions as when you're putting something into or removing it from the ultrasonic cleaner. You're going to need the clothing protection, the face mask, and the shield so that none of those droplets make their way into your T-zone, those mucous membranes where they can enter your body and infect you with the virus.
Jordan, we've got a couple questions that have come through already. Maybe you could address them. Two of them are kind of related to a topic you were just mentioning there. One of the questions from Michael is, does it need to be a special solution in your ultrasonic?
So I think the answer to that really is no. The solutions you're using in your ultrasonic already are designed to break down the fats and oils and greases that are holding the polishing compounds together. And the case, that capsule around the virus is made of fats and proteins, and they're going to be susceptible to that same thing. So any detergent designed for that type of cleaning will also break down the virus. And so especially if you add into that the temperature of your ultrasonic being above 150 degrees, right? And so that's just hot enough that you can't, when you put your hand in, you don't want to leave it in because it's hot, right? Your coffee is probably 140 to 150 degrees. So a little hotter than your coffee is that temperature where you need to be at. You don't want to be up to that 200 degrees where you're generating the steam. But that's kind of your sweet spot there, is going to break down that virus. Now, you could put a special antiviral solution in your ultrasonic, but then it may not do as good a job of getting the normal dirt and grime off of the case and the bracelet that you want to remove. And you definitely don't want to mix those chemicals without consulting with somebody who knows about that kind of stuff, because we got to remember that you can create some pretty noxious gases when you mix different chemicals, right? We know never mix bleach and alcohol, because that creates chlorine gas, I believe. You don't want to mix these different things together. So you do want to kind of be careful there. I think the regular solutions should be good. I did see, however, that L&R is advertising a solution that they've produced for the medical industries that is specifically an antiviral solution for use in ultrasonics. And so you may look into that and consider that, or maybe having two ultrasonics, one to break down the dirt and grime and another specifically for disinfecting.
Interesting. And I think a big part of that, obviously, is if this is a cased up watch, care taken into that as well to make sure that the watch is water resistant and things like that before it goes in there.
Absolutely. And that's why I mentioned before, I think remove that bracelet using your personal protection, put it in the ultrasonic, and then you may have to wipe down the watch with an alcohol wipe or something if you're not sure about its water resistance. Or you may be able to do that water resistance test first. That being said, if the movement is in there, you don't typically want to put that in the ultrasonic anyways. Even if it is water resistant, you may find yourself breaking up the luminous material on the hands or loosening a screw. different kinds of things that you just don't want to have to face. So typically avoid that. But if you're going to be removing, you can protect yourself, wipe it down, remove the movement, and then you can put the whole thing in the ultrasonic for sure. Get it disinfected if you're doing a full service on the timepiece.
Excellent. We've got a few more questions coming here, Jordan. This one goes kind of along with the same procedure, talking about the PPEs we're dealing with. And it's a question from Jared asking about the use of safety glasses for eye protection, I assume, instead of the face shield.
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert in that, and that's not a question that Dr. Jacobs addressed. So I don't want to speak definitively on that. I think it's going to depend on your safety glasses. Certainly the types of safety goggles that a scientist would use in the laboratory that creates a seal around your eyes would be good. Just your regular safety glasses that fit like sunglasses, I think may still produce the opportunity for the droplets to get around them and get up to your eye areas. I think that full face shield is definitely the safer approach to that, to keep no droplets anywhere on your face area at all.
Absolutely. Question here coming in specifically about the UV aspect of this treating, and I think you touched on it a little bit, talking about maybe doing some testing of stuff before you jump into it. But the question is specifically, do we know what the prolonged UV exposure can do to crystals and glues and gaskets and things along those lines?
So we haven't done a lot of experiments ourselves, but many watches are exposed to a UV light to cure the cement that holds the crystal in place already, right? And so those cases are already in manufacturing being exposed to UV light. And obviously also the sun produces ultraviolet light, right? And so we're accomplishing in one of these UV sanitizers in 30 minutes the same thing the sun is accomplishing in that 72 hours, right? And so I think that it's probably safe for those reasons that the watches are exposed to ultraviolet radiation already, although the UVC doesn't really make its way into our atmosphere. So the sunlight's not providing specifically that bandwidth of radiation. And so I would say we want to test those things for sure before you start doing it too much. So start with some less expensive watches and see what kind of effects you have before moving forward. And if anybody has performed those tests, we'd love to hear back from those and share those with everybody about what we see from those.
Absolutely, and you could even enter that while we're still here on the webinar. You could enter that into the chat area or into the questions, and we could maybe share with everybody what your research has been so far. There's a question here also about disinfecting a leather watch strap, and I know we've talked about that here in the office, but if you'd like to touch on that for a little bit.
Yeah, leather is a tough case because you don't typically want to get it wet. I certainly wouldn't want to say spray it down with alcohol or bleach or any of these things, a leather strap. That's sure to damage the strap. And so I think that our best bet for leather straps is probably either the ultraviolet lighting and be sure to expose all sides of the strap, or that waiting 4 days on the strap, removing it, putting it in a bag, and setting it aside as you do the work on the watch. Putting it back on, just make sure you're protected while interacting with that. Now we have to remember that the virus transfers in water droplets, right? And so while the virus may survive on a leather strap for 24 hours, I think that's what it said for cardboard in that slide. In order for it to infect you, the water droplet that's in the leather with that virus has to transfer to one of your mucous membranes. And the likelihood for that really isn't very good, right? Even if the virus is alive there, if you'd have to be rubbing it and getting it stuck on your skin and then rubbing your face and transferring that over. And so I think if you protect yourself, remove that leather strap, put it in a bag, seal it up, wash your hands, do the work on the watch, protect yourself, put your face mask back on, take that leather strap, reattach it to the watch, wash your hands, return it to the customer, that you are probably safe and you don't have any risk of contracting the virus from the leather strap in that situation.
Outstanding. And the thing I think that helps me so much whenever I'm thinking about all this is you keep going back to it, and it's an important aspect of this is kind of thinking of this virus with a bubble shell around it that's dissolvable. So I mean that's a big aspect of the virus to remember. I've got a question here from the clockmaking side specifically, and I think it's more of a comment than a question, but it's kind of talking about a procedure that Deanna is doing with her clocks, and that's she's kind of putting her clocks as customers are dropping them off, making sure there's a barrier between her and the customer, and then also as the clock comes into her workshop, setting that up into how she's termed it, and I think it's a good term for it, a quarantine for 4 days really before starting to work on the clock or doing too much to that clock. And I think that's a great aspect to do. And I think you mentioned it earlier also about making sure you've got a good take-in procedure to get good information about that clock back to the customer so that they have a record and you have a record of that clock whenever it's being done. So if you would like to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible approach, especially if we're talking about, antique finishes, and you don't necessarily want to wipe them down with these kind of solvents and that kind of stuff for risk of damaging the patina or the finishes on these clocks. That a quarantine period, 4 days, is certainly always a safe bet for an item like that. I mean, obviously you can't drop the clock case in the ultrasonic either, this kind of stuff. And so that's a good bet there. And certainly you've got those concerns of interacting with customers in your store and in their home if you do house calls with clocks as well. And so, if I personally probably wouldn't be doing house calls in this environment, but as things start to open up and we do return to doing house calls, making sure you communicate with the customer and you follow safe protocols. I'd want to ask them, have they had any symptoms of any sickness at all? Make sure that it's been 14 days before you enter their home for that. Wearing a face mask, wearing gloves, those kind of things while in the home, and limiting the amount of time that you're there. Another consideration is it's shown that fresh air movement and sunlight reduce the likelihood of contracting the disease. So having them open their windows, getting some fresh air circulating through the house ahead of your arrival for something like that is a good idea as well, just to reduce the likelihood of any transmission of the disease.
That's very good advice. If we've got anybody that would like to ask a question or to raise their hand, we'll get to that here in just a moment. We've gone through, I think, most of the questions that are here. I do have one other question. It's talking about the leather straps again, or watch straps, and it's about maybe a Lysol. I guess if you could have any Lysol or can get any Lysol, and I think that again that goes back to the communication you had a minute ago, and would definitely want to spot treat that. But I think you covered that a moment ago, discussing it with UV and stuff. But if you'd like to talk specifically about Lysol, if that might be of interest to the group.
Lysol is a fantastic disinfectant. I mean, it does the job that it's supposed to do. Just as you mentioned, I would want to spot check that. And then you have to think about the fragrances too. A lot of the Lysol products have got fragrances in them, and leather tends to absorb those fragrances. And so if the customer brings you a strap with no fragrance and you return it to them with a fresh lemon scent, are they going to be pleased with that? Maybe, maybe not. And so I would be hesitant probably to use Lysol in connection with leather straps. And certainly I would be looking for one that was odor, didn't have a scent added to it, and then spot checking and testing its reaction with the leather before I used it. I'm eager to hear from people what they're experiencing in their shops if they've opened up, or what thoughts they've been having. So I'd love to have some people raise their hands so we can unmute them and hear from them directly about the kinds of things they're doing, if there's anybody who wants to do that. No brave souls out there?
not seeing anybody come through yet. You know, something that I've been thinking about, Jordan, this is maybe a poke at myself with this beard that I've got, but you know, I've been thinking if I was in the workshop working right now, I would want to make sure that I had a good facial covering for sure to make sure that nothing's going to wick its way from an area that's covered with a schmuck or something back up to my face. So, you know, if I was working in the shop working on watches every day, I might want to be a little more trimmed than I am right now, or definitely wear a little bit better mask or a bigger mask to make sure that that area is covered. So, there's some things I've been thinking about personally.
Yeah, we certainly had that discussion with Dr. Jacobs. If you're in an environment where you have the risk of aerosolized particles that might have the virus in them, and you need to wear that N95 mask, that mask is designed to fit tightly around your face. And standard protocol is no facial hair in order to get that tight seal using a mask like that. I don't know whether having the beard in normal environment increases your likelihood or decreases your likelihood of contracting the virus, but certainly it makes the seal that any mask, whether it's a fabric mask or a disposable surgeon's mask, the seal that creates is not going to be as tight when you've got facial hair going on. If none
Absolutely.
of the, oh, looks like we've got one person who's raised their hand there.
Absolutely. This is Ray. I will unmute him, and then I've got one more question that's come through. So, Mr. Montoya, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, sir. Go ahead and ask your question to Jordan.
Hi, Jordan. Hello. Hi, this is George. Hello also to
Good to hear from you.
yeah, thank you. Me too. And just my questions concerning actually in Inman, California. Uh we have actually modified some sections to just to more using masks and using normally or protecting gloves, but we take care in some kind of way the we're running off on material like gloves and also masks, and they're not easy to get it right easy even if we paying more for gloves or something. Now with the material that you're talking, I mean it seems like really we have to change drastically too much, you know, everything. And we concern also the customers with all the situations, how they can handle it, and maybe will produce some kind of distance between, I mean, the business more kind of rapidly to get, some kind of source to for what used to get before on what I mean in expensive and growing profits for every individual. But in my case, for example, I'm running into a position to use my gloves, as you mentioned right now, not to do attaching one watch with another one, but when we get it for one customer in a specific, and he sent us for jewelry store, for example, I take care trade with them, and we receive 12 or sometimes 20 pieces. We handling with one glove, clean it up all every single one, separating the bracelets and trying to go from there because we don't have a specific material. Sources to get more gloves. In that position, we are kind of struggling, and in my position, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I think that's a real struggle for all businesses right now trying to open up. Facing this is that personal protective equipment and the shortages related to it. I looked into that, you know, as we're opening up at AWCI and needing to wear masks when we're in public spaces with other staff members and that kind of stuff. And it's amazing how expensive they are if you can get them. A disposable surgeon's mask was 4 cents each on February 1st on Amazon. And
Yeah.
now they are a couple of dollars each. They're
The
so
problem that we're
expensive.
facing, Jordan, the problem that we're facing is that when I'm trying to find pieces like that and buy boxes, they have restrictions in here, or they don't have the right one. They just have something material that is has kind of powders and bring up more mess into us. And normally, all that material that is the good stuff is normally designing just to go for the medical situation at this time
Sure.
or to the front line.
Yeah, for gloves, I don't have a resource, but what I will say about gloves is your skin is naturally a fantastic barrier that the virus cannot penetrate. So unless you have cuts or open wounds on your hands, um, the gloves are as much to protect the patient from you as they are to protect you from the patient. And so washing your hands regularly, if you don't have any open cuts or wounds, is as effective as wearing gloves. And so gloves may or may not be necessary because of that. With masks, I did get notification from Bergeon that they have ordered 250,000 masks, which should be available through Bergeon distributors. So if you're having trouble getting the disposable masks, you might consider approaching your usual material distributor and ask them if they've ordered any masks through Bergeon. And that might be a way to get masks for the industry. But with gloves, I don't have a great answer there, but there may be similar sources like that outside of the medical community that have gloves available. But certainly, as I mentioned, unless you have open exposed wounds, just washing your hands regularly is as effective as wearing gloves there. Thank you for that, Jorge. We're glad that you jumped in there with those comments and concerns, something that we're all facing. Hopefully, that will also ease up for everybody, and it will be easier to get those things as time moves forward.
Jordan, we've got a comment from Mark here about the use of marking tape on the floor to keep maybe a workshop that's got multiple employees, kind of a little more social distancing, give them a little bit of a reminder, for instance, at polishing stations or cleaning stations and things like that. You know, a reminder on the floor with some marking tape there. And I think that's probably a good practice to use as well.
I think many of us as watchmakers would love to have a box around our bench normally that kept people out. So what a great opportunity to put some tape on the floor and tell salespeople, don't step inside this box, right? Obviously a little more serious now than just our normal concerns of not wanting them to bump or interrupt us, but that seems very reasonable. You should maintain that physical distancing however you need to, and if a little tape on the floor is a reminder, this is my space, don't enter it, we're trying to all work together here, I think that's an excellent idea. If we don't have any other questions, I would like to just run through a few other things here before we close out the webinar. We're just about out of time here. Certainly, if we didn't get to your question, feel free to email us, education@awci.com, or to leave your questions in the survey. And we will do our best to get back to everybody with any questions you have. If you think of other things, please share them with us or ask questions. Some of our upcoming webinars. The webinar on May 12th is a webinar designed for beginners and collectors, an overview of chronograph mechanisms and their function. On May 13th, Tom Shoemaker is presenting on the Swiss lever escapement and its adjustment. Tom, I know you're on the call with us. Do you want to say something quickly about that webinar you're doing next week? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No problem, Jordan. I'm really looking forward to it, and it should be a good one. We're going to cover a lot of information in 1 hour format. It's designed for the experienced watchmaker, but we're going to have a little bit of information for everybody, and the handouts will have some good definitions and so forth as a reference material as well.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that as well. It's an ambitious undertaking, but I know we'll be successful at communicating the information we need to about the escapement there. You can see there on the list some other ones coming up. There's 2 lubrication webinars. One is an overview designed to help beginners and collectors understand kind of basic principles of lubrication, and the other one is more for the professional to go a little more in depth. I'm still talking about lubrication in general ideas, but in depth in that way that professionals need to understand lubrication. And then our webinar about analyzing timing results, sponsored by Witchy and Jules Burrell. We started categorizing many of these webinars into series of webinars because we want to do many more of them and follow in series. So you'll see that they're, the basic skills webinars are for beginners and technicians, where the professional essentials webinars are more for the watchmaker at the bench. The watch basics are for the collectors and beginners to give an overview of topics. The lubrication is going to be a 3-part series, this being the first one in that series for professional watchmakers there. I also want to remind everyone resources we have on our webpage. the recordings of these webinars, the store where you can buy books and DVDs, those kinds of items. We always encourage people to give donations. We are a not-for-profit, and so if you want to support our mission, awci.com/donate is an easy way to donate to the cause. And I know that the government has made special provisions in light of COVID-19 to encourage people to donate for not-for-profits. And even if you don't itemize your taxes, you can deduct at least $300 in charitable donations this coming year as a part of that CARES Act that they passed to respond to COVID-19. Again, thank you everyone for your participation. We appreciate your support. If you have any ideas of things that you would like for us to communicate to you about or put together a webinar, we'd love to hear those as well. And I encourage everyone to be safe and stay healthy, especially as you begin opening up your workshops again. We're excited that things are opening back up in certain parts of the country, and we look forward to being able to teach classes again very soon.
Thank you, Jordan, for your time, and thank you to all of our participants for joining us today. Look forward to the survey as well as recordings of this one, and also the handouts that you can utilize for your business there. So thank you again for everybody for joining us today.